I was just going to give a brief presentation on UX design. So each month at these events, I get to meet a lot of you, and I know there's a lot of you who are in the startup space, either involved in one or considering starting one, and I have a lot of interesting discussions about the value of good UX design in the startup space. And so I thought I'd just put together a small talk on some things that you might want to consider if you're in that space. And the focus of the talk is going to be around designing for people and the purpose that can serve in your startup. So as a lot of you in the room will be aware, everything is designed. So whether it's the physical things you see and interact with every day or digital things, or the things you might not consciously recognize as being designed, like store layouts or the process of catching a train with Mikey. Everything is designed. But as designer Brian Reed once said, everything is designed, but not everything is designed well, or few things that are designed well, I should say. And to me, I think the key consideration to bad design is in ignoring the user. So with that in mind, there's three things I want to touch on tonight to do with designing for people. The first of those is about understanding people. Secondly is about guiding people. And thirdly is about surprising people. So understanding people. Now, good design solves problems, and any new startup will be aware of that and will probably see that their product is the ultimate solution to whatever problem they're trying to solve. But how do you know that the problem you're solving is really going to meet the needs of your target audience? And how do you know that the problem you're solving is even a problem worth solving? There's a few ways to go about it, but the key is really in understanding the issues that your target audience face. Depending on the specifics of your product and your target audience, one great research activity to undertake is observation, which is where you essentially observe people struggling with the current solutions to whatever problem you're seeking to solve. Take Mikey as an example. If you wanted to reinvent Mikey or create a better public transport system, you can do a lot worse than standing around Flinders Street Station for a couple of hours, observing people working through the system, whether it's topping up their card, issues at the gate, trying to find their way to where they need to go on time. There's lots of things that you can learn by just sitting back and observing people. Alongside observation, conversation is the next best thing. Talking to real people, having real conversations about real issues is a great way to get some insights around things you could do. Whether it's face-to-face or over the phone, it's a great way to dig into the way people experience the problems that you're trying to solve. If conversations aren't a possibility, then sending out surveys via online, using SurveyMonkey, things like that, is another great way to collect great data around these kinds of things. But conversation is, I guess, by far superior, because only through conversation can you follow little tangents and delve deeper into certain areas, which you just can't do with a static survey. The key here is really understanding the issues that people face. And when you're having these conversations, you've really got to resist, I guess, leading the witness down a path that's only going to serve to validate your current thinking. What you really want to do is discover some new truths. And part of that, I guess, is the demographic of people you speak to. It'd be quite easy to grab 5 of your friends and have chats about Mikey. You're already going to have your own preconceptions about the issues with Mikey. But by speaking to your close friends, they're probably all of a similar age group to yourself. They've probably got a similar worldview and have similar experiences. But by branching out a little bit, you include say a 60-year-old and an 18-year-old, someone who's new to Melbourne. They're all going to have different experiences with something like Mikey, and will come at it with different challenges that you can potentially help solve. So that's understanding people and researching. The second thing I want to talk through is around guiding people. And this has got more to do, I guess, with websites and apps that might be central to your startup idea. So anytime you download a new app, there's a first experience that you go through. And sometimes you are guided through that experience, and other times you're not. There's a term called user onboarding, which you may or may not be familiar with, which describes that process of guiding someone through those early steps of using your software, using your app. Sometimes it's done well, and sometimes it's not. And there's a semi-famous example of a startup that didn't do it particularly well, called Colour. I don't know if anyone out here will have heard of Colour or not. It's from a couple of years ago now. And the reason it's famous, I should say, Colour was a proximity-based social network. So it created little social networks in whatever area you happen to be in at that time. And the reason it was famous at the time was because it managed to raise $41 million in venture capital, which at that time was, I think, probably the most anyone had ever raised for a startup, and even now would be pretty rare. But where they failed was in that user onboarding. So while all the news at the time was around the $41 million they raised, the real story behind the app was the terrible onboarding experience and the failure that soon came after it. If you haven't heard of Color, has anyone heard of Color? Anyone? One person, great. There's a good reason why the rest of you haven't, and it's because they ignored something known as the blank slate state of their app. Now, the blank slate state is essentially what the app would show you when there is nothing to show you. Imagine your Facebook feed if you had no friends. They hadn't considered that state of the app, which is what every user was going through at the start of this process. Being a proximity-based social network, it relied upon there being other people around you using the app at that exact time. And if there was no one there using it, there was nothing to show, and you would quit the app. And when the app only has value when there's other people around using it, and there's no one using it, it never got traction, and yeah, failure wasn't too far behind. Obviously, a better investigation into their onboarding could have solved that in the early days. There's probably a number of things they could have done, whether it's just broadening the scope of the range that they were using for, I guess, to ring fence the social network. I think it started out about 50 meters, which is pretty small. Or whether the onboarding process required you to invite people around you as part of signing up. There's a number of things they probably could have done, but didn't, and the $41 million couldn't save them. There's a site I'm subscribed to, which I quite like. It's called useronboard.com. And what this site does is it breaks down the onboarding process for a lot of really popular sites and apps, such as Instagram. I find it to be a really great resource, and yeah, I recommend checking it out if you haven't already. The third and final thing I want to talk about is a goal that I think all startups need to set for themselves, and it's around surprising and delighting your users. And it doesn't need to be big, elaborate surprises. It's more about the small moments and little interactions you can put into your app to put a little smile on the faces of the people who are using it. There's another site I like to go to called Little Big Details, which is a great collection of these little micro interactions that various sites and apps have injected into their product. And I'm also going to take you through three of my little recent faves I've discovered on here. So something Airbnb do. I don't know how many of you have used Airbnb, probably a lot of you. It's not uncommon when you're doing a search on Airbnb that you might contact quite a few hosts in one area. And what Airbnb had done, it's a small thing, but they just simply grey out the ones that you've already made contact with. So as you're going back through the search, you can easily identify which ones you might want to follow up on that you haven't already done. Can save you some time, save some confusion of double messaging people. The next one is something baked into Siri. It's a real edge case scenario, but I love that they've thought of it. So if it's a Tuesday night, it's 11 p.m., and you've asked Siri to remind you to do something tomorrow at 9 a.m., it's pretty clear you're talking about Wednesday 9 a.m. Once the clock ticks past midnight, that tomorrow can have a whole different meaning. So do you mean tomorrow as in today, as in 9 hours away, or do you mean tomorrow as in essentially 2 days away? And so when you talk to Siri about tomorrow after midnight, it'll come back and get you to clarify what day you really mean, which I think is a nice little touch. And the last one I wanted to share isn't so much of a helpful addition, but I really enjoyed the attention to detail that Google injected into their recent rebrand. They've created this sweet little set of animations based on the 4 dots that are slowly becoming synonymous with their brand. Each one, I guess, presenting a different state of an app that you might be using, a Google app you might be using. So whether it's waiting for you to do something, it's got a slow undulating kind of animation there, to when it's listening to you and it's like, yeah, cool, I can hear you, or when it understands what you've said, little happy dance there. I think it's little details like that give their pretty powerful AI a really nice personality and a touch of humanity as well.